It started with silence, a dam built to control nature but now trapped in the middle of war. For months, Ukraine watched the Russian-controlled Kakhovka Dam fill up, 1 million tons of water pressing against its ancient walls. Every drop, every ripple, became a ticking time bomb. Intelligence satellites circled above. Ukrainian analysts knew that this much pressure wasn't natural. Someone was planning something. The Dnipro River below had turned into a mirror of tension. Farmers, soldiers, and entire towns waited, unaware that the balance of water would soon decide their fate. In Moscow, military engineers monitored screens, their eyes locked on water levels. The dam wasn't just a piece of infrastructure anymore, it was a weapon. A single command could unleash destruction stretching for miles. Ukraine had already warned, if the Russians opened the gates, southern Ukraine could drown. If the dam broke, the Crimean water supply could vanish. The situation was a paradox. Both sides depended on the same river, but saw it as a tool of war. Weeks passed, the rain poured endlessly across the region, swelling rivers beyond control. Drone footage showed cracks spreading like veins through the dam's concrete. Russian media called it routine maintenance. Ukrainian sources called it a trap. The world watched and waited. Then came the night. Thunder echoed across Kherson as storm winds ripped through the valley. Satellite images showed a sudden surge in the reservoir. The water had reached a critical level. Ukrainian soldiers stationed nearby felt the ground tremble slightly beneath their boots. At 2:15 a.m., a bright flash erupted on the horizon. Seconds later, the roar of collapsing concrete replaced the sound of rain. The dam had broken. Millions of tons of water exploded through the gap, tearing through fields, villages, and military positions. Entire bridges were swallowed in minutes. Cars floated away like toys. In Kherson, people woke to the sound of sirens and screams as streets turned into rivers. Power stations short-circuited. Communication lines died instantly. Within an hour, more than 40 towns were underwater. Ukrainian emergency units rushed to evacuate civilians. Boats replaced trucks. Helicopters hovered low, dropping lights into the darkness below. People climbed rooftops, waving flashlights for help. Animals struggled in the muddy flood, carried away by the violent current. It wasn't just water anymore, it was destruction with momentum. From Moscow came the first official statement. Russian officials called it a Ukrainian sabotage. But satellite evidence told a different story. Analysts saw thermal signatures, signs of explosions inside the dam before it collapsed. The world's media lit up. The UN demanded explanations. The question was simple: who would benefit from such chaos? In Kiev, the mood was grim. President Zelensky declared the disaster an act of ecocide, accusing Russia of using water as a weapon. He said the destruction of the Kakhovka Dam would have long-term consequences for millions, not just in Ukraine, but across Europe. Entire ecosystems were wiped out overnight. Farmland turned into swamps. The Dnipro River, once a symbol of life, had become a scar. Reporters on the ground described heartbreaking scenes. Elderly residents carried what little they could: photos, pets, documents before climbing into rescue boats. Children cried as they saw their homes disappear beneath the muddy flood. In some areas, the water rose so fast that people had only minutes to react. One soldier recalled how he had to choose between saving a child or retrieving a comrade trapped by the flood. He chose the child. As dawn broke, the full scale of the catastrophe became visible. From the sky, the landscape looked like an inland sea. Roads, forests, and entire villages had vanished. The current carried debris, fuel, and chemicals, a toxic mix, heading downstream toward the Black Sea. Environmental experts warned that this could become one of the worst ecological disasters in modern European history. Military analysts had another perspective. The flood reshaped the battlefield itself. Russian fortifications on the riverbanks were washed away. Minefields vanished underwater, creating new danger zones. Tanks and armored vehicles were useless in the flooded terrain. Ukrainian commanders saw both tragedy and opportunity. The enemy's defenses had been weakened, but at a terrible human cost. Meanwhile, in Crimea, panic began to spread. The dam had supplied water to the North Crimean Canal, a vital source for agriculture and cities. Without it, reservoirs began to dry up. Farmers faced collapse. The Kremlin's propaganda machine scrambled to shift the narrative, claiming that the dam had failed because of Ukrainian shelling, not Russian sabotage. But satellite evidence continued to contradict that story. Internationally, the reaction was immediate. Leaders across Europe condemned the attack, calling it a new level of warfare, using nature itself as a weapon that was something the modern world had hoped to leave behind. The United Nations sent emergency aid, while NATO intelligence teams analyzed the flood's impact on military logistics. The U.S. released satellite data confirming explosions near the dam's structure before it gave way. Inside Ukraine, rescue operations continued for days. Thousands were displaced. Drinking water supplies were contaminated. In the flooded zones, power lines hung dangerously close to the water, sparking fires even amid the deluge. Volunteers used inflatable boats to deliver food and medicine. Every day, new bodies were found drifting downstream, and yet, even in tragedy, stories of heroism emerged. A Ukrainian doctor swam across a flooded street to reach a stranded family. Soldiers risked sniper fire to rescue civilians trapped in the upper floors of half-submerged houses. Entire communities worked together, proving once again that the human spirit doesn't surrender easily even when the river turns against it. Weeks later, as the water finally began to recede, the full devastation came into focus. Crops were gone, homes destroyed, roads unrecognizable. The dam site itself was a ruined twisted metal, shattered concrete, and silence. Forensic teams began collecting evidence, piece by piece, hoping to prove what the world already suspected, that the collapse wasn't nature's fault. Experts later confirmed what the satellite data had shown. The internal structure of the Kakhovka Dam bore signs of internal explosions. Charges had likely been placed within the maintenance tunnels, detonated deliberately. The pressure of the water did the rest. It was not an accident. It was a message. That message echoed far beyond Ukraine. It reminded the world how fragile human control over nature truly is and how war can twist even rivers into weapons. For generations, the Dnipro River had been a source of life, a path of trade, a symbol of resilience. Now it was a wound dividing a nation. In the following months, reconstruction began. Ukrainian engineers studied the ruins, dreaming of rebuilding what was lost. But for many, the emotional damage could never be repaired. People spoke of ghosts, the sounds of rushing water that haunted them at night. Entire families had vanished, washed away in the darkness. The global response grew louder. Environmental organizations demanded that the destruction of dams and ecological sabotage be recognized as war crimes. The International Criminal Court opened an investigation. Witnesses testified, sharing harrowing footage of the flood's first moments. Meanwhile, Russia denied everything, accusing Ukraine of Western propaganda. But truth, like water, always finds a way to surface. Independent investigators revealed a timeline of intercepted communications suggesting Russian units were warned about the flood hours before it happened. That single fact that they were prepared became the silent confession. Months later, drone footage showed the Dnipro's flow returning slowly to its natural course. The scars remained visible brown lines of dried mud marking where the water had once reached. Nature was healing, but painfully slowly. The people, however, carried memories that wouldn't fade. Ukraine had waited for 1 million tons of water to fill that dam, hoping perhaps that control could return, that the flood could be contained. Instead, the flood came for everyone. And in the aftermath, the world learned a bitter truth in war. Even water takes sides. And as the sun sets over the broken dam today, the air is still heavy with silence. The silence of what was lost, the silence of those who drowned, and the silence of a nation that refuses to stop fighting, not just for land, but for life itself.